My name is Maya Henderson. I'm 28 years old, and I just spent the last 2 years creating my graphic novel masterpiece, a 3-book fantasy series with over 800 illustrated pages, intricate character designs, and narrative complexity that represented the culmination of my entire creative career. Last Saturday at my parents' family party, I refused to give my father Kenneth $139,000 for his latest guaranteed success business venture, and he responded by picking up my laptop from the poolside table and casually dropping it into the deep end while announcing, "Oh, sorry, I accidentally dropped your laptop in the pool," with a smirk that made clear there was nothing accidental about destroying 2 years of my professional work. My mother Janice immediately added, "It's just an accident, Maya. These things happen," as if deliberately destroying someone's career work was comparable to spilling a drink. While 15 family members stood watching the laptop sink to the bottom without a single person objecting to the blatant lie about this being accidental. I didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't even respond to Kenneth's obvious satisfaction with punishing me for refusing his financial demands. I simply stayed at the party for another hour making mental notes about every single financial support system I had been quietly providing for years, then drove home and waited until midnight to begin systematically dismantling their comfortable lifestyle in ways that would teach them the difference between real accidents and deliberate consequences. I work as an independent graphic novelist and visual storyteller, creating original illustrated narrative works that blend sophisticated literary storytelling with cinematic visual art to produce books that have garnered critical acclaim, substantial commercial success, and a dedicated international readership. My annual income from graphic novel sales, licensing agreements, merchandise rights, and speaking engagements averages $185,000, with individual years reaching as high as $240,000 when new book releases align with successful licensing deals. The creative process for graphic novels is extraordinarily time-intensive and intellectually demanding, requiring me to function simultaneously as writer, illustrator, character designer, layout artist, and visual director for complex narrative works that typically contain 300 to 400 pages of integrated text and artwork. Each page requires 8 to 12 hours of work, including initial sketching, character refinement, background development, inking, digital coloring, lettering, and final composition, meaning a single graphic novel represents approximately 3,000 hours of focused creative labor. My breakthrough success came 5 years ago with Shadowlands Rising, a dark fantasy graphic novel featuring morally complex characters navigating political intrigue in a world where magic was dying and technology was emerging to replace it. The book received starred reviews from Publishers Weekly and Library Journal, won the Eisner Award for Best Graphic Novel, and sold over 75,000 copies in its first year. Extraordinary numbers for an independent graphic novel from a debut creator. The success of Shadowlands Rising established my reputation as a significant new voice in graphic storytelling, leading to publishing contracts for additional books, invitations to speak at major comic conventions and literary festivals, and licensing opportunities for merchandise, potential television adaptation, and international translations in 12 languages. But beyond commercial success and critical recognition, what I value most about my graphic novel career is the creative freedom to tell complex stories that blend visual artistry with narrative depth in ways that neither traditional novels nor mainstream comics typically achieve. My work explores themes of identity, power, transformation, and moral ambiguity through characters whose visual design reinforces their narrative complexity and whose story arcs require the integrated text and image format that graphic novels provide. The project Kenneth destroyed by throwing my laptop into the pool was my most ambitious work yet, a trilogy called The Meridian Cycle that would follow interconnected characters across 3 books, totaling over 800 illustrated pages. I had been working on this series for 2 years, creating detailed character designs for 47 major and supporting characters, developing intricate world building for 5 distinct cultures with unique visual aesthetics, writing and revising the complete narrative arc across all 3 volumes, and completing the full illustration work for the first book, plus substantial progress on the second volume. The laptop contained every working file, sketch, character design, layout, color palette, and narrative draft for the entire trilogy, representing approximately 5,000 hours of creative labor that couldn't be recreated simply by starting over, because the creative development process itself was iterative and cumulative, with each design decision building on previous explorations that existed only in those destroyed files. My father, Kenneth Henderson, is 60 years old and has spent his entire adult life cycling through failed business ventures, get-rich-quick schemes, and guaranteed opportunity investments that invariably lose money, while he blames external factors rather than accepting responsibility for poor planning, inadequate market research, and unrealistic expectations about business success. Kenneth's business history includes a failed restaurant that closed after 18 months due to poor location choice and his refusal to adapt the menu to actual customer preferences, a landscaping company that went bankrupt because he underbid every project and couldn't maintain positive cash flow, a used car sales venture that collapsed when he purchased vehicles with undisclosed mechanical problems, and various multi-level marketing schemes that cost him thousands in inventory he couldn't sell. Each business failure was accompanied by extensive family discussions about why this particular venture didn't work out, and elaborate plans for the next can't-miss opportunity that Kenneth was certain would finally make him wealthy. He approached business ventures with optimism, untempered by learning from previous failures, market analysis, or realistic assessment of his own capabilities and available resources. But what made Kenneth's business failures particularly frustrating for our family was his expectation that relatives should fund his ventures despite his documented track record of losing money on every enterprise he attempted. He would present each new business idea with elaborate projections about potential returns, minimize the risks and startup costs, and pressure family members to invest in opportunities that were really just subsidies for ventures that would predictably fail within 2 years. My mother, Janice Henderson, is 57 years old and has spent decades enabling Kenneth's business delusions by supporting his ventures emotionally and financially, making excuses for his failures, and pressuring family members to provide the funding that Kenneth couldn't obtain from legitimate investors or financial institutions who would properly evaluate his business plans. Janice works as an administrative coordinator at a mid-sized insurance company, earning approximately $58,000 annually, handling policy documentation, customer service coordination, and basic office management. Her income provides the household's financial stability since Kenneth's business ventures generate minimal reliable revenue, but she resents having to be the family's primary earner, while Kenneth pursues business dreams that never materialize into sustainable income. Her resentment manifests in passive-aggressive comments about how some people have stable careers while others are still trying to find their path, and in her enthusiastic support for Kenneth's expectations that I should fund his business ventures since my graphic novel career has been financially successful. But what neither Kenneth nor Janice seem to understand, or perhaps they understand perfectly well and simply choose to ignore, is that my creative career is actual legitimate professional work that generates substantial income through years of skill development, market understanding, and relentless creative labor. They treat my graphic novels as a hobby, or a fortunate accident, rather than recognizing the professional expertise and sustained effort required to succeed in competitive creative industries. Kenneth has always been dismissive of creative careers generally, and my graphic novel work specifically, characterizing artistic professions as not real work, because they don't involve physical labor or traditional business operations. He's made countless comments over the years about how I should get a real job with a steady paycheck instead of drawing pictures for a living, as if creating sophisticated illustrated narrative works was comparable to childhood doodling. Anyone can draw pictures and make up stories, Kenneth said when I first announced my intention to pursue graphic novel creation professionally. That's not a career. That's what children do for fun. You need to think about real employment that will provide financial security. His characterization of graphic novel creation as something anyone can draw revealed his complete ignorance about the specialized skills required for professional illustration, narrative construction, visual storytelling, page composition, and the business acumen necessary to succeed in publishing industries. But Kenneth's opinions were never informed by actual knowledge. They were reflections of his own insecurities about his business failures and his need to diminish others' success to protect his self-image. Janice's dismissal of my career was subtler but equally invalidating. She would describe my work to friends and relatives as, "Maya does some art projects," or "Maya writes and draws books," in tones that suggested casual hobbies rather than professional creative work, generating six-figure income and critical recognition. When my first graphic novel won the Eisner Award, essentially the Oscar of the comics and graphic novel industry, Janice's response was, "That's nice, dear," before changing the subject to Kenneth's latest business venture that was certainly about to take off any day now. Her inability to celebrate my professional achievements revealed that acknowledging my success would highlight Kenneth's failures, creating family dynamics she preferred to avoid by simply pretending my accomplishments weren't significant. But despite their dismissal of my creative career, and their characterization of my work as illegitimate or unimportant, Kenneth and Janice had no hesitation about expecting me to provide substantial financial support for their household expenses and Kenneth's business ventures once my income exceeded their combined earnings. Have you ever had family members dismiss your professional success while simultaneously expecting you to fund their lifestyle with the income they characterize as unimportant? The financial support for my parents began gradually 5 years ago, when the success of Shadowlands Rising generated my first substantial royalty payments and licensing income. Kenneth approached me with a business investment opportunity that required $35,000 for equipment and inventory for a pressure washing and exterior cleaning service he was certain would generate enormous returns. I was hesitant to fund another Kenneth business venture given his documented history of failures, but he and Janice presented elaborate arguments about how this time was different, how he had learned from previous mistakes, how the market research showed genuine demand, and how my investment would generate returns that would benefit the entire family. Against my better judgment, I provided the $35,000 Kenneth requested, framing it as a loan with the understanding that he would repay the principal plus modest interest once the business became profitable. Kenneth's pressure washing venture followed the predictable pattern of his previous failures: initial enthusiasm and optimistic projections, gradual recognition that he had underestimated costs and overestimated revenue potential, increasing financial stress as expenses exceeded income, and eventual closure after 18 months with substantial losses and zero repayment of my loan. But instead of acknowledging the business failure and his inability to repay my loan, Kenneth reframed the situation as my investment in family support, rather than a loan requiring repayment, suggesting that I shouldn't expect to get my money back because family helps family during difficult times without keeping score.